this beautiful biscuit. It's tall, it's fluffy, it's flaky. Stick with me. I'll show you how to make this in just a minute. How I make those nice, beautiful, tall biscuits. I've got 1.25 cups of flour in this bag, and I'm going to show you how to measure out the proper way, 1 cup of flour, and then we'll put it in there, and then I'll put it all together and we'll go from there. So I've got flour in this bag, just all-purpose flour, and what you do to measure it properly is you scoop it out and dump it in your measuring cup. And I'm actually running out of flour. I bought this flour in a 25-pound bag and figured I'd never use it all before we left. There. So then I just turn the spoon over, knock it off a little bit, and then ride it along the top. So that's a cup measured the proper way. And I just dump it in there, and we're done with the measuring cups. Now, there's a tablespoon of cream of tartar. There is a teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then this is sugar, which I don't add every time, but I did last time and they were really good. So that's about 1.5 teaspoons. Then I just put it in the bag, close up the bag, swap it all around to mix it up. And then when it's good and mixed, then I open the bag again and squeeze all the air out. Close it up again so it's nice and airtight. Put it together like that, and then I'm just going to put it in the freezer overnight, and in the morning we'll put the rest of the ingredients in it, and I'll show you how to knead it and get them nice and flaky, and then we'll cook them. See you then. Thank you. Okay, it's quite a bit later. I have the flour mix out of the freezer. I dump it in a bowl. It's really cold. Then this is the butter flavored Crisco, which was also in the freezer all that time. Put about half of it in here and then mix it up so it all gets covered with dough. Then I take my pastry cutter and cut this part quite a bit until they're really nothing bigger than like pea size. And the flour starts to turn color a little bit. Okay, then we do the rest, but this time we do it with our fingers and smush it like that. These pieces are going to be a lot bigger. you don't want them to be enormous all at the same time. And even though this flour is cold enough to be almost painful on your fingers, this shortening melts pretty fast, so don't keep it in your fingers any longer than you absolutely need to. Now you got some pieces this size. Those are just fine. Then I've had 3/4 cup of milk in the freezer for about 5 or 10 minutes, so it's really, really cold. You just dump it all in at once. Mix it around with a fork. And it's going to end up kind of dry and shaggy looking, and that's what you're really looking for. I don't know if you remember, but there's 2 1/4 cups of flour in here, plus cream of tartar and baking soda and salt and a little sugar. Now it looks really shaggy, and there's even some dry in the bottom, but that's perfectly fine. What we do now is we dump it out, and you'll see the dry stuff because it's going to come out on the top of it. Okay, we're done with the bowl. Then we push it down with our hands. You can see all that shortening flakes. And what we're doing here is just pressing it down by hand to about 3/4 inch thick, or even an inch. And then with our pastry scraper, we fold it and then push it again. You can see the dry stuff is starting pretty much to go in there. Now I fold it from all sides so that the dry stuff comes up and goes in there. Because it gets less dry all the time, and at some point you're going to need a little flour for your hand. Now folding it over like this is what gives it the flakiness. I'm going to fold it one more time. You can see it doesn't really even want to go together now, but that's just fine. Then I take just a regular drinking glass, coat the edges with some flour, push it straight down. You probably going to get about 6 biscuits. I put those in a regular pie plate. So this one is so flaky, it's already coming apart. Now the recipe originally, one of the recipes I saw said, leave them so they don't touch each other, but I find that they go a lot higher if you do let them touch. I'm actually going to get 7 biscuits this time. Okay, after they're like that, all we're going to do is put them back in the freezer. When they go in the freezer, this time, that's when I light the oven. And the oven, on this stove, I don't have temperature regulation. So you can pick that up a little bit. So I don't have temperature regulation, so I just turn it on all the way, which happens to be about 450. And they stay in there because the bowl is frozen, the plate is frozen at that point in time. They stay in there about 25 minutes or so. Just before they're done, I brush the tops with a little melted butter and brown them up nice. And when that next stage happens, I'll be back. Okay, the biscuits are out of the oven. Well, you can see that they're reasonably tall, especially since I didn't make them quite as thick as I usually do when I start out. So that is how I make tall biscuits.